Hello, and welcome to Mending Chasms, Building Bridges and Community. My name is Leena Sharma Seth, and I am your host. I'm looking forward to my dialogue with today's guest, and first we open with an acknowledgement. Canada exists as we know it today because of colonization. While we work to disrupt colonial and oppression-rooted practice in the work we feel called to do at Mending the Chasm, we also acknowledge our presence as uninvited guests on Brant Tract Treaty territory known as the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, the Huron-Wendat, the Attawandaron or Neutral, and many other Indigenous communities who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. We also acknowledge the harm of colonization that resilient people of the global diaspora have experienced, including displacement, land theft, enslavement, violence, genocide, and cultural appropriation. Our aim is to work in solidarity with fellow community members to heal from the harm of colonization and to reclaim the joy, the inclusion, well-being, and liberation that is every human's birthright. So my guest today is a publisher, executive producer, and award-winning author. Jeff Tiessen is a proud inductee in the Canadian Disability Hall of Fame, known for his advocacy work, expertise, and lived experience with respect to diversity and inclusion, and he's a respected educator and advocate. Double amputee, three-time Paralympian, gold medalist, and world record holder, Jeff is founder and president of Disability Today Publishing Group, the leading source for information about Canada's disability community since 1990. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, thanks, Leena. It's great to be here.
I've been wanting to have this dialogue with you since we met earlier this year, and honestly, I'm really grateful that you said yes. So let's start. I know I gave a little bit of an intro for my viewers about who you are, but maybe in your own words, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, that's all high-level stuff, and I appreciate that, and I'm very proud of those accomplishments. But I'm a dad of two, a husband, used to have a hobby farm, and loved my horses and goat. Yeah, I enjoy writing. I enjoy traveling, meeting new people. I'm a pretty sentimental guy. So, yeah, those are things that maybe describe me a little bit better on a day-to-day basis for sure.
Amazing. Love that you had a hobby farm. So fun. So how do you think, and I think this is, for viewers who know me and know the work that I do at Mending the Chasm, you know what I care about and what I'm curious about. So how do you think that the diversity within the disability community is often overlooked or misunderstood? And how can we better recognize that diversity?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to start. I think often the disability community is painted with a very broad brush. I mean, it is so diverse within and of itself. Me as a double arm amputee, even under the amputee category, you might say. I mean, the challenges that I have, the lifestyle is can be very different than a leg amputee or even a single arm amputee, and then extend that all the different disabilities as well. So I often talk about the community as more of a canvas of fine strokes, in that we are all so different.
I appreciate that so much. And through some of my own work and the spaces I've had the privilege of being in, my own ableism has been made apparent to me. I do have the privilege of being, I'll say, I don't know if it's a privilege, to be honest. I don't have that awareness because it's not a day-to-day lived experience, but having these conversations with people in the disability community, the disability justice community, it just has been brought home to me. How much I think we all have to learn about how we treat each other and how we even define, because if we don't see something that maybe falls in the box of what we consider disability, we fail to acknowledge it, or it just creates, I'm going to say, experiences of othering because of what we don't know. So I've really appreciated learning from your course, Disability Mindset. And so maybe there'll be time to talk about that a little later on. But maybe let me go to another question. In what ways, thinking about, your experience and how you came to be in your situation, in what ways did your accident impact not only you, but your family and your support system? And I appreciated when we were kind of talking to prepare for this conversation, you kind of gave me something else to be thinking about that I hadn't really thought about, how when someone experiences a disability, how that affects the family. So I'm curious from your perspective, what were some ways that the community did support you or could have better supported you around your experience, but also maybe for folks who are living in communities where your neighbor or your friend, or how do we expand our thinking to support families and support networks?
So it was 1977, and I won't make a long story out of it, but it's important to give context that, in those days, there wasn't a manual or something online for my parents to look up on how do I raise a child that just lost both hands and elbows, right? So community was very important in terms of support, and it still is today, but that's all they had to lean on. I had an electrical accident. So it was a very traumatic accident after touching 27,000 volts. So small town kid, I was supported through the newspaper. So I was often followed. So there was a dubious celebrity to my injury and who I had become as an amputee and a crippled or handicapped child. And that was the language that was used. After a 100-day stay in a burn unit, I was off to the Ontario Crippled Children's Center. So again, that backdrop or that context of, you talked about ableism and how people with disabilities were perceived with not a lot of value, a lot of pity. I mean, it was obviously a very difficult time for me and my family. And to answer your question, it was very hard on my mother, of course. And I think today we still see some of that residual trauma that she experienced over many years, not just within that accident time. And I often tell the story of, where maybe my mom was with my younger brother and sister. I was 11 when I had my accident. So my brother was 7 and my sister 5, so quite young. Into town they would go, and they're suffering and struggling too. My parents had to dedicate so much attention to me, and they'd be asked not how are they doing, but how's your brother? How's Jeff? How's he coming? So the attention was never on them, which kids need, right? It was always focused on me, and honestly, resentment did come to a boil at different points in our lives until we were old enough and mature enough to understand what was going on at that time when we didn't.
Yeah, I appreciate the journey it is to kind of find that space and to maybe meet ourselves and each other where we are in those moments. Because I agree with you that I think as much as we have Google and we have so much today, and maybe my next question kind of speaks to kind of where the timeless challenge is always around our own confidence and trusting, ourselves and taking the risk to ask questions in a way that it shows care. So the question maybe I'm going to ask is, how can we normalize making mistakes when it comes to discussing disability? And that's what I was talking about with the fear. A lot of people are afraid to make mistakes, so they don't ask or they don't say anything. So how can we normalize making mistakes so that we can have the conversations that we need to have, and to just engage in this learning from a collective place?
I guess I would start that answer with, people with disabilities are not fragile. I mean, what we've been through, we're pretty tough, really. So that fear factor, which definitely exists, it starts, or it can be circumvented with, good intention, respect, empathy. And what you don't know, we're for the most part. There are some invasions of privacy with questions, but for the most part, we're very comfortable with being asked, can I help you? Which is a little bit different than do you need help? I mean, I don't need help for much, although I'm a double arm, prosthetic wearing amputee, but I'll take it to make life a little bit more convenient at times. So it starts there. Language, we all refer to ourselves as something different. There's the formality of person first, person who uses a wheelchair. Most wheelchair users call themselves wheelchair users or wheelies among the community. And so, it's a respect of what they want to be identified as. And that just comes from a question. How do you like to be referred to? Do you need, or can I help you? I think it's some sensibilities and sensitivities kind of get lost when there's that fear or uncomfort and or discomfort. And that's what we need to get past, that feeling of uncomfortability or discomfort. And then comes confidence and competence on the part of people that we engage with and can become friends.
Love that. Love all of it. The reference to language and as someone who did come up in a time when person first was really emphasized, and my own evolution of like, okay, I have to, from my own engagement with different communities, I've learned to just be curious and ask questions rather than assuming, because I might have, one queer friend who likes to be referred by certain pronouns, for example, but I don't assume that everybody who has that context wants to be referred to that way. So that's really a good guide, for viewers who are thinking about maybe, occasions where you chose not to have a conversation because you were afraid. How can we start taking those risks and be curious and know that we all want to be seen and acknowledged, I think. And that's the piece where people finding the way to do that. That is because I think it's actually the fragility of the person. You talked about like we're tough in the disability community. I think it's the fragility is on the part of the person who's afraid to ask. So how can we get a little tougher, give ourselves some grace, expect to screw up. And if we screw up, get to the business of repairing harm so that we can keep moving forward. So I loved all that you shared there. And so you touched on some of the things I wanted to look at with language. So maybe where I'll go is, how do you think we can better navigate that balance? You talked about the language of, can I help you versus do you need help? How do we better navigate that balance between offering help and respecting someone's autonomy, particularly in disrupting this notion of a savior complex? And so that idea of like, you're rushing to open the door for someone and they tell you, I didn't need you to help me. And then sometimes people go, oh, I guess I shouldn't be offering help, or just bruised feelings or whatever can happen. What would you offer on that?
Yeah, that's a great example. When, we don't accept help and some become a little bit offended with that, and again, they were well-intentioned. But yeah, we have an independence and an autonomy. And, I've often said it may look like we're struggling to do something, but a lot of us with assistive devices, prosthetics, wheelchairs, mobility devices, we do things a little bit differently. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're struggling if it looks like that to you. Again, it's getting to that comfort zone and, starting a conversation with how's your day going, not what happened to you. Or which we get a lot. So, yeah, I think it's just trying to normalize things a little bit. When you think about, we all have differences in some capacity or in some way, and it's looking for commonalities is probably the way to go.
Right. Remembering our common humanity first and foremost. I mean, I know that sounds a bit Pollyanna, but I really do come back to, for me, what's given me a lot of comfort and confidence to be curious is knowing that like we have lots in common too. There may be things that are different about, it's kind of like the question that people get, when you're racialized at times, it's like, where are you from, for example, right? And the one thing I say is like, because you'd shared a story how you were in line to get a coffee and someone had asked you about, and I remember thinking, Like, why would somebody think it's okay to do? And so what I like to offer and work with that I do is that, it's about having social capital and trust and relationship with someone. And so if just like you wouldn't ask someone, in line to get a coffee about the nature of their maybe marital relationship, or like, because you don't know them. So how do we, come back to, do I have enough relationship to ask the question that I want to ask? And also just to meet the person where they are as well. I think that I come back to that. Yeah, I'm thinking about where do I want to go next? So
Well, and
one of the
just to add to that too, Leena, I
yes.
mean, we as the disability community, we have biases too, and we're ableist too. We're not on some kind of pedestal where those things are concerned. So we make mistakes as well within our own community and with others. So yeah, it's getting past that fear of making a mistake, and if you do, let's find a better way around it. It's a learning experience.
Yeah, I find that there's a lot when people show up with a level of humility, even if they've asked something that may very well be a microaggression, but to see someone's posture of like, I could have said that better, and or I'm sorry about that, and like leading with that when you're kind of when it's either been brought to your attention or you catch yourself, because there's times where I've said something, I've mispronounced someone, and I realize after that I didn't do it. I didn't catch myself quick enough to not do it, but I take that moment to acknowledge, say my apologies. I will try better, or I have more learning to do. Sometimes that's because we only know. There's just so much to know, and when it's not your lived experience, like you said, even if you're disabled but you have a specific disability, it doesn't mean you understand every experience of disability. And so, how can we hold that posture of humility that is really helpful in this work and in life, I would say. One of the things that I took away from our conversation prior was that the idea of like how, and maybe I'll just ask the question, it will come through that, but can you speak to that concept of inspiration exhaustion, and how does it affect, both individuals with disabilities and those around them?
Yeah, it's, I mean, that one could fall under the umbrella of microaggressions, and it's a big topic. I mean, people find me to be very inspiring shopping at the grocery store. This is not the ceiling of my ability, but for some it seems like it is. And people with disabilities get this all the time, where we're being commended or found to be inspiring for mundane, ordinary things. And, it makes us think, is that what you think of us? Is that as much as you think we're capable of? So there was an advocate in Australia. She's passed away now. Her name was Stella Young, and she coined this phrase, inspiration porn. I don't use it a whole lot, but what it means is objectifying the disability community for the benefit of others. So someone may feel better about themselves because life could be worse for them and they're having a bad day. We talk more in what I do with mindset, as you referred to earlier, that inspiration exhaustion, where those microaggressions of "you're so inspiring," "you're so great," over and over and over. It's kind of like that death by 1,000 cuts, that constant reminder all the time, and us finding a way how are we going to deal with this in the moment? Is it someone that we want to show a little empathy back to, or have we just had it for the day and don't want to take that on again? So yeah, it's a challenge that we meet, and again, it's well intentioned, right? Mm-hmm. But if people understand that, we didn't wake up in the morning to be someone else's inspiration or to motivate. We're just getting through the day and to work, to home, to what we need to do, like everyone else. And inspiration exhaustion, it gets tiring.
Yeah, and I appreciate the inspiration porn. I've heard trauma porn. I've heard that notion of just a part of us that really amplifies the suffering component of our experience, rather than acknowledging the fullness, like the whole experience, that it's a spectrum of joy, accomplishment, capacity. It's not, so I appreciate that reminder of it's, yeah, that I can't even say it better than you, but just that idea of, like I think about as a brown-bodied woman, how people have said to me, "Oh, your English is really good." And like when you said, "We can do so much more than what you think," I kind of was like, "Wow, is that how easy it was to impress you?" Because I can probably do more than that too. So just again, like wanting to create bridges for viewers who maybe if you don't have a deep awareness about disability, but maybe have, because like you said, we can be knowledgeable about one experience, but know nothing about another. But I also see the bridges across our mutual experiences of exclusion for different aspects of our identity, of course. But I'm seeing and again, through the course that you offer, I mean, maybe I should give you some space to talk a little bit about that course, because I found, I haven't finished it yet, but I've found it to be so valuable in terms of, I just really loved the way that you center the voice of lived experience, and it's an empowering platform that just gives the space to talk and really connect to the humanity of each person and not just the sum of one aspect of their identity. Do you want to say more? It's your shameless plug here.
I'll take it. Thank you very much. It's a nice beach ball. Yeah, it's a brand called Mindset. It's a brand from my company, Disability Today Publishing Group. And, it tries to take the complexities of disability and really simplify it for people and through the voice of lived experience. So we have a cast of 20 plus members of the disability community, all different disabilities, and they talk about these things that we've talked about: ableism, inspiration, exhaustion, implicit bias, language, etiquette, and share how that impacts their lives and how it doesn't as well, where that fear factor. Don't need to be afraid because whatever language you're using, as long as it's respectful, and well-intentioned, I'm okay with it and we can work past it. So yeah, it was a really intriguing project. I learned a lot. It's designed for the kind of corporate community. So it's about allyship and just getting to know disability and people with disabilities a little bit better. And again, building that comfort and that confidence. And we're starting work on an iteration for the post-secondary sector for classrooms and colleges and universities. So it's authentic, it's informative for sure, educational, and I hope a bit transformative too, for people to comfortably come to learn about disability a little bit more.
Amazing. I mean, I know you called them cast members, but I'm like, it felt like it doesn't feel performative at all. I feel like I felt the presence of the authentic experience. It was also intersectional. I appreciated having the different people we were learning from, or that you get to learn from in the course, talking about the ways their racial identity impacted them alongside their experience as a disabled person. And so I appreciate that. That's really well done, because again, I've seen a lot in my time, and so can't recommend this highly enough from my end. I'm going to ask a question. I'm just being mindful of my time here. Again, kind of speaking to that bridge across, our different experiences as practitioners of equity, if you give me permission to call you that, because I see that way as a part of the community. In systems of oppression, there's often an assumption that being more independent or able-bodied or dominant culture is more valuable. How do we challenge and disrupt this thinking? And I mean, I feel like you've given us some examples already, but, are there any ideas or any, maybe for viewers who are like, maybe seeing the bigger picture and going, wow, why do we do this to each other? But what are some suggestions you have that help us to disrupt that thinking?
I think what we're talking about, and again, a very broad brush to use the word again, is that ableism, which is akin to sexism or racism or culturalism. And it's important to understand that a lot of that isn't necessarily always our fault. I mean, it's the worldview, the way we were raised, the culture in which we were raised, our lived experiences. So it's acknowledging that. It's trying to identify in ourselves, why do I think that way? Why do I perceive a disabled body as lesser than or less value. And that extends probably to other marginalized groups. So if we can kind of name that within ourselves, confront it, and then challenge or change it. We have that choice. But first we need to be introspective with ourselves and say, yeah, did I just say that? Am I thinking that? Why am I thinking that? And then I think that's how we move forward.
Yeah, and I mean, you just really tightly described how that happens, but I appreciate that's quite a journey for some people. If I find if it's not a practice in your life to bring curiosity to what you're engaging with in life, it's hard to apply it here. So it's something I like to say to people, that be curious about your relationship with, with curiosity, with accountability. So if you cause, be willing to receive feedback if you make an effort and it's not right. It doesn't mean give up, or that, it's that persistence and care, I think, are the two things I would say. And the other piece that reminds me, whenever I find my bias rising up around, oh, well, it must be something with this person or this community, I lean on the teachings of Resmaa Menakem. He's the author of My Grandmother's Hands. And some of the things that he talks about are that, communities and people are not defective. It's systems that are defective. And so if we kind of come from that place and remind ourselves, to me, that's a very disruptive piece already. And so, for viewers, if that works, use it. If not, toss it, that's fine as well. And so I'm going to ask the question I ask a lot of my guests at this point. This work is difficult at times. What are some practices that you have that sustain you when this work gets hard?
And ending with a difficult question too. I'm in the fortunate situation of being an author, a journalist, an interviewer, and meeting people like you, Leena, and I'm not trying to be ingratiating here, but truly, when I'm learning new things and giving myself kind of a check, and just the empowering stories of single mothers with children with disabilities, those that have managed, can lean into the word overcome maybe, but managed life in a successful, happy way, and contributing members of society. It doesn't have to mean at work. It can mean to a family. It can be a support group, a network, a neighborhood. Those things bring me a lot of joy for sure. And keep propelling me.
Amazing, amazing. Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have this time with you. And thank you so much for being a guest today. I want to just say a quick word to my viewers before we wrap up. Just thank you for your feedback, your suggestions for guests. Keep them coming. And really, if you're someone in the community who is building bridges, or know someone, drop me a line at leena@mendingthechasm.ca, and I'd love to hear from you. So thank you for watching, and until next time, keep building bridges in community.